My sister called me a monster. Not the man who lied to her. Not the man who drained savings from strangers. Me. Because I brought proof to her wedding. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I handed her a folder. And in that folder was the truth. But here's the part nobody tells you. When you expose a liar, you don't become the hero. You become the villain in someone else's love story. And if you think this ends at the wedding, it doesn't. Wait until you hear what he did next. My name is Lara Carter. I'm 29 years old. And for most of my life, I've been cast in one role. The difficult one. My older sister, Elena, was the golden child. Soft-spoken. Charming. Socially fluent. She had a way of making people feel seen. I had a way of seeing what people were hiding. Guess which one gets labeled problematic? When Elena introduced us to Adrian Wolfe, I knew immediately my parents would adore him. And they did. He had that voice. Measured. Confident. Warm in just the right places. The kind of man who makes eye contact when he talks about vision. He shook my father's hand like a future business partner. He complimented my mother's cooking with practiced sincerity. And when he turned to me, he smiled like he already understood me. That was the first red flag. No one understands me in 5 minutes. Dinner was smooth. Too smooth. He talked about venture capital, private investment rounds, strategic growth partnerships. My dad nodded like he was listening to a podcast. My mom looked impressed. Elena glowed beside him. Then he made a joke. Lara's the analytical one, right? Every family needs a skeptic. The table laughed. It sounded harmless. But skeptics don't get invited to fairy tales. They get tolerated. If you've ever been the skeptical one in a family that prefers comfort over truth, comment below. You know what that laugh feels like? 2 weeks later, Elena called me. They're engaged. It was fast. Too fast. I asked how long he'd been running his investment firm. She paused. Well, technically he's restructuring right now. Restructuring. That word again. It showed up in every one of his explanations. I didn't react. I just opened my laptop. Public records are quiet. But they don't lie. Adrian's LLC existed. But there was no public client portfolio. No team structure. No consistent filings. Just irregular deposits. Structured deposits. Increasing over time. Like confidence games often do. And here's the thing about me. I don't confront feelings. I confront data. Wait till you hear what happened next. I started tracking timestamps. Payment clusters. Business registrations. 2 former associates of his had filed minor civil claims. Not fraud. Not criminal. But misrepresentation of projected returns. That phrase stayed with me. Misrepresentation. Adrian wasn't stealing outright. He was selling belief. He promised access. Positioning. Early entry into markets most people didn't understand. And when returns didn't come, he shifted language. Blamed timing. Blamed volatility. Blamed long-term strategy. Classic. I called Elena. Carefully. I just want you to double-check some things. Her voice changed. You don't trust him. It's not about trust. It's about transparency. Silence. Then the sentence that shifted everything. Why can't you just be happy for me? There it was. I wasn't concerned. I was jealous. I wasn't protective. I was bitter. Because when someone is in love with an illusion, the truth feels like sabotage. Cream cardstock. Gold embossed lettering. Vineyard ceremony. My mother texted. Please don't create drama. I hadn't said a word publicly. But they already knew. They knew I wouldn't clap blindly. And that made me dangerous. I had 2 options. Stay silent. Or gather proof strong enough to survive denial. I chose the second. I contacted an old colleague, Marcus Hale. Forensic financial analyst. He owed me a favor. I didn't tell him it involved my sister. I sent documents. Transaction histories. Entity filings. He called me 3 days later. Lara, this is layered. How? He cycles early investors' funds to pay out visible returns to new ones. My stomach tightened. That's not sustainable. It's not meant to be. Adrian wasn't building wealth. He was building reputation. And reputation can float longer than liquidity. The vineyard looked like a magazine cover. White roses. String lights. Soft violin music. Elena looked radiant. Adrian looked untouchable. They exchanged vows. Everyone cried. I waited. Timing matters. After the speeches. After champagne. After the room softened. I walked up to them. No microphone. No announcement. Just a folder. Elena smiled at first. Then she opened it. Her smile faded. Adrian leaned in. I watched his face. Confusion. Then calculation. Then anger. This is taken out of context. It's structured differently than it looks. Lara doesn't understand long-term capital cycling. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I said one sentence. You deserve informed consent. The room shifted. Conversations lowered. My father approached. My mother's face hardened. Elena looked at me like I had stabbed her. You couldn't wait, she whispered. I waited years. I waited until proof. I waited until you were legally binding yourself. But love doesn't see timing. It sees betrayal. If you've ever tried to protect someone who didn't want protecting, comment below. You know how lonely that feels. The fallow eye left before the shouting escalated. 2 days later, Elena blocked me. My parents stopped answering. Family group chat went silent. Adrian sent me a single message. You've made an enemy. That's when I realized. This wasn't over. Because men like Adrian don't collapse quietly. They retaliate. And what he did next almost destroyed me. I thought the wedding was the climax. I was wrong. The wedding was just the trigger. 3 days after I exposed Adrian, my phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers. Muted calls. At first, I ignored them. Then the messages started. I heard you fabricated documents. You really tried to sabotage your sister's marriage? Why would you lie like that? Lie. My chest went cold. I hadn't posted anything publicly. I hadn't spoken to extended family. So how did they already have a narrative? Then it clicked. Adrian didn't deny. He reframed. He moved fast. Faster than I expected. That's when I realized something important. He had done this before. By the end of the week, I had been recast. Not as the concerned sister, but as the bitter one. The jealous one. The unstable one who never wanted Elena to be happy. My aunt called. Lara, sweetie, you've always been intense. But this? Intense. That word again. Not careful. Not analytical. Not right. Intense. It's fascinating how women become intense the moment they disrupt comfort. If you've ever been labeled dramatic for simply telling the truth, comment below. You know this script. Here's what he did. And this part is important. He didn't attack the evidence. He attacked my credibility. He told my parents I'd always resented Elena. He reminded them I left corporate unexpectedly. He hinted at emotional instability. He positioned himself as concerned. Lara's going through something. I just hope she gets help. That line is lethal. Because it sounds compassionate, while quietly discrediting everything I say. Gaslighting doesn't scream. It whispers. Elena blocked me everywhere. Instagram. WhatsApp. Email. My parents stopped responding entirely. Family events continued without invitations. Pictures posted. Smiling faces. Adrian centered. And I was erased. I thought exposing him would protect her. Instead, it isolated me. And here's the worst part. For a moment, I questioned myself. Did I push too soon? Did I misinterpret? Was I reckless? That's how psychological manipulation works. Even when you have proof, you still doubt. Wait until you hear what I found next. 2 weeks later, Marcus called again. Lara, he's accelerating. What do you mean? He's pulling larger sums now. Bigger promises. Bigger projections. Of course he was. When exposure threatens a grifter, they don't slow down. They extract faster. Because collapse is coming either way. Adrian had 2 goals. Discredit me. Secure enough capital before the structure fell. And then something happened that shifted everything. One of his former investors reached out to me directly. Her name was Claire. Mid-40s. Divorced. Used inheritance money to enter early growth positioning. Adrian's words. She lost nearly everything. He said returns were cycling. She told me over a quiet call. He said the market correction was temporary. How much did you invest? I asked. Silence. 280,000. My stomach dropped. This wasn't small claims territory anymore. This was devastation. I asked if she had documentation. She did. Signed agreements. Voice messages. Projected ROI breakdowns. And something else. A recorded call. Where Adrian explicitly promised secured positioning. That's not just misrepresentation. That's intent. My hands shook. Not because I was scared. Because I understood what this meant. If I moved forward publicly, it wouldn't just fracture my family. It would destroy him. And when men like Adrian feel cornered, they become dangerous. The message came at 2:14 a.m. from a private number. You should have stayed quiet. I didn't respond. 5 minutes later. Families don't recover from betrayal. Then, you won't either. I stared at the screen. Adrian had shifted. No more soft gaslighting. Now it was intimidation. And here's the thing about me. I don't respond to fear. I document it. Screenshot. Time stamp. Archive. If you were in my position, would you have backed down? Be honest in the comments. 3 days later, Elena showed up at my apartment. Unannounced. No ring on her finger. But still married. Her face looked thinner. Less radiant. More alert. I listened to the recording, she said. My heart pounded. And, he said projections. Not guarantees. Of course he did. He always leaves technical exits. But he implied safety, I said. Silence. She was wobbling. Doubt was entering. And Adrian knew it. Because he started escalating at home too. She didn't tell me everything. But she didn't need to. Her posture said enough. The next morning, my employer received an anonymous email. Claiming I manipulated financial data. Claiming I fabricated documents. Claiming I was under emotional distress. Adrian wasn't just attacking socially. He was targeting my livelihood. That's when I understood the full scale. This wasn't about my sister anymore. This was about control. He needed me discredited. Because if I stayed credible, he was finished. And I had a decision to make. Stay defensive. Or go nuclear. I called Claire. And then I called 2 others Marcus had flagged. Within 72 hours, I had 3 testimonies. Documentation. Wire transfers. Projected return models. And that recorded call. I wasn't just the skeptical sister anymore. I was building a case. Not for revenge. For prevention. Because if Adrian wasn't stopped, he would simply move cities. Change names. Start again. And somewhere, another sister would be called jealous. Another woman would be labeled intense. Another family would choose illusion over evidence. And I wasn't going to let that happen. I thought exposing him privately would be enough. It wasn't. I thought showing Elena the truth would protect her. It didn't. So I did the one thing Adrian never expected. I went public. And what happened next didn't just ruin his reputation. It exposed something about my own family that hurt more than any lie he told. There's a moment before you hit publish. A quiet second where everything is still reversible. I stared at the screen for a long time. Claire's testimony was documented. The wire transfers were verified. The recorded call had been transcribed. I wasn't speculating anymore. I had evidence. But going public would mean crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Because once something lives online, it doesn't disappear. I could lose my parents permanently. I could lose Elena for good. And I might ignite something in Adrian I wasn't prepared for. My finger hovered. And then I pressed it. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming. No insults. No emotional paragraphs. Just facts. Documented timelines. Transaction patterns. Audio excerpts. Public filings. I ended it with one sentence. This is not revenge. This is protection. Within 10 minutes, my phone started vibrating. Within 30, it exploded. Shares. Comments. Private messages. And then, the first new victim. His name was Daniel R. Early 30s. Startup founder. Trusted Adrian's growth syndicate model. Lost $180,000. I thought I was early, he wrote. You were early, I replied. Early into a cycle. And that's when I realized the scale. Adrian didn't just manipulate emotionally vulnerable individuals. He targeted ambitious ones. People who believed they were stepping into exclusive opportunity. He made them feel chosen. That's the trick. Grifters don't sell lies. They sell belonging. If you've ever been drawn into something because you wanted to feel ahead of everyone else, comment below. That desire is powerful. And dangerous. By nightfall, Adrian responded. Not with evidence. With a statement. I am deeply saddened by Lara Carter's public attempt to damage my reputation. These claims are malicious, personal, and rooted in long-standing resentment. There it was again. Resentment. He framed it as sibling rivalry. A jealous sister trying to sabotage love. And here's the problem. That narrative is easier to believe. Because it's cleaner. Simpler. More digestible than financial manipulation. Truth is complicated. Villain stories are convenient. At 1:12 a.m., Elena finally texted me. Why would you do this publicly? I stared at the screen. Because privately didn't work. 3 dots appeared. then disappeared, then reappeared. You've destroyed everything. No, I exposed everything. There's a difference. But when someone is emotionally entangled, exposure feels like destruction. The next morning, 2 financial bloggers picked up the story. By afternoon, a small investigative podcast requested an interview. Adrian's name began appearing in threads. Old posts resurfaced. More testimonies came in. And then something happened that I didn't anticipate. My father called. He hadn't called me since the wedding. His voice sounded different. Less certain. Lara, what exactly are you trying to do? Stop him. Silence. You've embarrassed this family. There it was. Not is it true. Not are people hurt? Embarrassed. Image first. Truth last. It hit me then, deeper than Adrian's lies. My family wasn't upset because I might be wrong. They were upset because I might be right publicly. That realization hurt more than anything Adrian did. Because lies from strangers are expected. But denial from family? That's heavier. 3 days later, I received legal correspondence. Defamation notice. Threat of civil action. Demand to remove all content immediately. Classic intimidation tactic. But here's the flaw in his move. You can't sue facts. Marcus reviewed everything again. Every claim was sourced. Every file documented. Every statement factual. The law firm likely didn't know the depth yet. They were operating on intimidation. But Adrian was running out of runway. And he knew it. She showed up again. No makeup. No composure. No script this time. He's angry, she said quietly. At me. My pulse slowed. About what? He says I'm feeding you information. I'm not. I know. That was new. She knew. Cracks were forming. I listened to the audio again, she whispered. And I heard it. He promised, she continued. He promised safe positioning. There it was. The shift. Denial weakening. Reality creeping in. But leaving isn't instant. Love doesn't dissolve at the speed of logic. And Adrian sensed her doubt. Because that night, he did something that crossed a new line. Claire called me in tears. He emptied the account. What? He dissolved the entity. Funds are moving. Adrian wasn't defending himself. He was liquidating. Preparing to disappear. That's when I realized. This wasn't about reputation anymore. This was about containment. If he left the country, if he restructured, if he vanished, he would reset, and Elena would be tied legally to the fallout. I had hours, not weeks, and I made the decision that would change everything. I contacted authorities. The police didn't arrest him immediately, but they opened inquiry, and when Adrian found out, he didn't threaten me. He didn't send legal letters. He showed up at my apartment, and what he said next wasn't manipulation. It was a warning. There's a very specific kind of silence before something dangerous happens. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's the quiet hum of normal life right before it fractures. I was making coffee when the knock came. 3 sharp knocks. Not hesitant. Not polite. Deliberate. My body reacted before my mind did. Because I knew. I walked to the door slowly. Looked through the peephole. Adrian. No suit. No smile. No performance. Just him. And something colder behind his eyes. For a split second, I considered not answering. But avoidance doesn't stop men like him. It just delays them. So I opened the door. He didn't step inside. He didn't need to. He leaned slightly forward. You've made this bigger than it had to be. His voice was calm. Too calm. It was already big, I replied. He smiled. Not warmly. Strategically. You think you're protecting people. I am. He shook his head slowly. You've destabilized markets you don't understand. That sentence almost made me laugh. Markets. He still couldn't stop performing. You're dissolving entities and moving funds, I said evenly. His jaw tightened. So I hit something true. You don't have proof of intent, he replied. Intent. That word matters legally. And he knew it. Adrian never makes direct threats. He engineers ambiguity. Then he said something that shifted the temperature. You've put Elena in an impossible position. I felt that one. Because that was the only lever he had left. My sister. You think she's safe in this? He continued quietly. Public scrutiny ruins marriages. There it was. Not a threat to me. A threat to her. If you've ever dealt with someone who weaponizes love to maintain control, comment below. It's subtle. And it's cruel. I stepped outside. Closed the door behind me. We stood face to face in the hallway. I've spoken to 6 people, I said. He didn't react. Two are willing to testify. A flicker. There's a recording. Longer pause. And law enforcement is reviewing it. That did it. The calm cracked. Only for a second. But enough. You don't understand how this works, he said quietly. No, I replied. You don't understand how it ends. For the first time since I met him, Adrian looked small. Not weak. Cornered. And cornered people make unpredictable choices. He leaned closer. Lowered his voice. You think exposing me saves her? Silence. She will resent you for the rest of her life. He let that sit. Because that was his final weapon. Not fear. Isolation. He wanted me alone. And the truth is, he was partially right. Even if I won legally. Emotionally, I might lose her forever. That's the cost no one talks about. When you pull back a curtain, you don't just reveal the monster. You ruin the magic. Leave, I said. He stared at me. Then, if this escalates, you're not immune. That was the closest he came to a threat. And it was enough. Because when someone like Adrian hints at retaliation, you believe them. He walked away without another word. But the air felt different after he left. He wasn't negotiating. He was calculating. And I had just accelerated the timeline. 2 days later, authorities contacted Claire formally. Then Daniel. Then 2 others. Official inquiry. Not an arrest yet, but active investigation. Adrian tried to liquidate faster. But accounts were flagged. Transfers frozen. And that's when the pressure turned inward. She showed up at my place again. But this time, she was shaking. He screamed at me, she whispered. My chest tightened. About what? He said you're manipulating people. That you're obsessed. Classic inversion. Accuse the accuser. He said if I testify against him, I destroy our future. There it was. The ultimatum. Love or truth. He made her choose. And she looked at me like she was drowning. I don't know what's real anymore, she said. That's when I realized something painful. Adrian didn't just lie about money. He restructured reality around her. And pulling someone out of that is slow and terrifying. The investigation became public 2 weeks later. Small article. Financial misconduct inquiry. No names at first. Then an update. Adrian Wolf identified. That's when the calls started again. But this time, different tone. You were right. I didn't know it was that serious. We're praying for Elena. Funny how quickly perception shifts once authority validates truth. My father called again. His voice smaller this time. Lara, we didn't realize. No, you didn't want to. There's a difference. Cornered financially. Exposed socially. Under investigation legally. He did what men like him always do. He tried to disappear. But he couldn't leave. Because Elena's testimony mattered. And he needed her silent. So he moved into charm mode again. Flowers. Apologies. Tears. And she almost folded. Almost. Until she found something. Something I hadn't seen. Something buried. A second account. Under a different name. With transfers dated before they even met. Meaning, this wasn't circumstantial. This was systematic. And when she brought it to me, I knew. It was over for him. Authorities escalated. Charges were drafted. Adrian's circle shrank. But before the arrest, before the headlines, before the collapse, he sent Elena one final message. Not to threaten. Not to manipulate. To confess something I never saw coming. And that confession changed how I saw him completely.
The message came at 11:47 p.m. Not to me. To Elena. She forwarded it without commentary. No warning. No explanation. Just the screenshot. 3 lines. That's all it took. I never meant for it to spiral this far. It started as leverage. You were never supposed to get hurt. I read it twice. Then a third time. Because that wasn't denial. That wasn't gaslighting. That was partial admission. And partial admissions are dangerous. They're crafted, measured, strategic. I called her immediately. Where is he? I don't know, she whispered. Her voice sounded hollow. He left after the article update. Did he say anything else? Yes. He said you forced his hand. There it was again. Even in confession I was the cause. That's how manipulators exit. They don't own the damage. They frame it as reaction. Elena had found it accidentally. A secondary financial entity. Registered 3 years before they met. Different city. Different partners. Same pattern. Deposits. Rapid cycling. Dissolution. Reformation under new name. This wasn't situational. It was serial. Adrian didn't stumble into manipulation. He engineered it. And that realization did something to Elena I hadn't seen before. It replaced doubt with clarity. And clarity is irreversible. The next morning my phone rang. Detective Morales. They'd traced multiple complaints across 2 states. Patterns matched. Intent was no longer ambiguous. This wasn't civil dispute territory. It was fraud investigation. They're moving quickly, she said. He may attempt to relocate. He was already trying. Airport flags were triggered. Counts frozen. But here's the part people don't understand about collapse. It's not cinematic. It's procedural. Paperwork. Warrants. Phone logs. And then, rest. It happened quietly. No dramatic chase. No televised takedown. Just a controlled detainment outside a rental property 2 cities away. He didn't resist. That detail stuck with me. He didn't fight. He didn't deny. He didn't perform. Almost like he'd rehearsed this ending. When the news broke, it spread faster than my original post ever did. Headlines, threads, analysis. And suddenly, I wasn't the jealous sister. I was the whistleblower. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Validation after destruction doesn't feel good. Feels heavy. She came over that night. Not dramatic. Not screaming. Just empty. She sat on my couch and stared at nothing. I married him, she said quietly. Not crying. Just stating. Like a diagnosis. You didn't know. I ignored signs. That's different. And that's where guilt burrows. She wasn't grieving him. She was grieving her own judgment. And that's a harder grief. Because betrayal from others hurts. But betrayal of yourself, that lingers. If you've ever looked back and realized you ignored your own instincts, comment below. That kind of regret is quiet, but loud at night. They arrived unannounced 2 days later. Not angry, not defensive, just shaken. My father looked older. My mother avoided eye contact at first. We were wrong, she said finally. 4 words. Simple, but expensive. Because admitting you prioritized image over truth forces you to examine every other time you did it. And I didn't feel triumphant. Felt tired. This wasn't victory. It was fallout. Podcasts requested interviews. Financial forums dissected the case. People I'd never met messaged me. Thank you. You saved my retirement. I almost invested. I hadn't set out to become anything. I just refused to stay silent. But silence protects predators. Noise protects strangers. That's something I understand now. 3 weeks later, Elena brought me something else. Notebook. Adrian's. Personal entries. Strategic notes. Client targeting language. But buried between pages of calculation was something I didn't expect. He wrote about imposter syndrome. About early failures. About desperation to appear powerful. It didn't excuse anything, but it explained something. Adrian wasn't a mastermind. He was terrified of being ordinary. And instead of building substance, he built illusion. And illusions require maintenance. Maintenance requires manipulation. Manipulation eventually requires lies. And lies always collapse. I saw him once more. In court. He didn't look at me at first. When he finally did, there was no rage. No performance. Just exhaustion. He didn't plead not guilty. He negotiated. Reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation. More names surfaced. More entities. It was bigger than any of us realized. And for a split second, I wondered what would have happened if I stayed silent. How many more would have believed him? How many more Elenas would have been caught in orbit? After the hearing, Elena and I sat outside the courthouse. Sunlight felt inappropriate. Too bright. I hated you for a while, she admitted. I know. I thought you wanted to ruin my happiness. I didn't answer. She looked at me finally. You saved me. That sentence didn't feel triumphant. It felt earned. Painfully. Our relationship isn't perfect now. Trust rebuilds slowly. My parents still struggle with public fallout. Family friends disappeared. Reputation shifted. But something else changed too. The role I carried my entire life. The difficult one. The intense one. It doesn't land the same anymore. Because now they understand what intensity protects. And here's the part one didn't expect. I don't resent Adrian. I don't fear him. I don't hate him. I see him clearly. And clarity removes power. Exposing someone doesn't make you heroic. Makes you lonely. Until truth catches up. And truth is slow. But it always arrives. If you had proof your family didn't want to see, would you still speak? Or would you protect peace? Be honest in the comments. Because sometimes the villain in someone else's story is just the person who refused to lie.